sound?
Ah, perfect. How's my sound?
Good.
Good.
All right. May God grant us the strength to overcome the trials that lay before us. Sounds like a pretty current thought. But these are the words of St. Patrick, the 5th century missionary who played such an important role in the spread of Christianity in Ireland 1600 years ago. This Tuesday, March 17, we celebrate Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, as March 17 is the anniversary of his death in 461. The day is celebrated in countries with prominent Irish communities such as the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Celebrations include parades, dyeing the Chicago River green, which makes me wonder, traditional food, and sometimes lots of alcohol. And yet, we really do not know much about the life of St. Patrick. We get a little glimpse of him in 2 letters that we know he personally wrote. One, where he condemns the British leaders for attacking, enslaving, and even killing his newly baptized Irish converts. The second writing provides rare autobiographical insight into his life and mission. But we really don't know a whole bunch. What we do know is that he was not Irish. Patrick was born in approximately 385 into a Christian family in Britain, which was occupied and ruled by Rome at that time. There are varying accounts of his being or not being raised within the Catholic faith. I think probably that he was raised within the faith because it was this faith that sustained him throughout his life. His family were wealthy landholders who staffed their estate with slaves. We do not know the origin of these slaves, but let's face it, no country or culture has escaped at some point having slaves in their history. The family estate was probably somewhere along the western coast of Britain, close to the sea which separated them from Ireland. His early life was marked by comfort, but all of that changed at the age of 16 when he was captured by Irish raiders and taken back to Ireland as a slave. He spent the next 6 years working as a shepherd in the fields by himself. Lonely and afraid, he turned to God for solace, spending much time in prayer. And it was here in his years of captivity that he began to dream of bringing Christianity to Ireland. At the age of 22, after being enslaved for 6 years, he heard God's voice in a dream, telling him that it was time for him to go back to Britain, to leave Ireland, and that at the coast he would find a ship to take him home. So he walked the probably 200 miles to the coast, where he found a ship bound for Britain, but the captain of the ship refused him passage because, after all, he was an escaped slave. So Patrick started to pray. And soon, the captain of the ship changed his mind and agreed to take him back to Britain. Patrick was always convinced that God had protected and delivered him safely home. Ireland in 400 AD was deeply spiritual, following a Celtic pagan religion. It's difficult to get a real understanding of the Celtic religion and beliefs because there was little recorded. What I can tell you is that basically they were polytheistic, believing in many gods, and a variety of supernatural beings. They were deeply respectful towards animals and nature. They believed that the world was alive. The rocks, rivers, trees, each had a spirit. Sounds pretty good to me. Mm-hmm. Eventually, many of the Celtic traditions were blended into Christianity by the word, not by the sword. That is how Patrick spread his message, by the word, not by the sword. So these traditions being blended into Christianity, for instance, we have All Saints' Day or Halloween, which is rooted in the annual Celtic pagan festival of Samhain, celebrating the autumn harvest and the return movement from light to darkness. So we have All Saints' Day coming out of their pagan festival. Now Patrick, back in Britain, has a second revelation. In a dream, an angel told him to return to Ireland to bring the Christian faith. But this was not going to be an easy task because he needed to accomplish quite a bit before it could happen. In order to become a Christian missionary, he needed to have formal religious training. So he began what would be 15 years of schooling. And he was ordained a priest in the Catholic Church at the age of 37. As he had requested, he was then sent back to Ireland, the land of his captors. It is important to recognize that at that time there were some Christians in Ireland. So Patrick did not introduce Christianity to Ireland. He helped that small Irish Christian community to spread exponentially. Now, since Ireland at that time was largely pagan, spreading the Christian faith was not an easy task. He traveled from village to village, preaching and healing, always on the move. And there were times when he ran into problems. There is one story about one of the tribal leaders taking objection to his wanting to convert the locals, and he was going to strike him with some sort of implement, and Patrick started praying, and this is how the story goes. The tribal elder's arm got stuck up in the air and he couldn't hit Patrick. Stories abound, don't they? Okay, so when I look at the differences between Christianity and the Celtic pagan religion, I do not see a great divide. But basically, here's what we're looking at. Christianity was unified. In other words, everything was pretty much under the control of Rome. They were monotheistic faith, one God, with an acknowledged scriptural basis, the Bible. Now, the Celtic religions were tribal, so each one is kind of doing their own thing. Polytheistic, where they have many gods, with traditions mostly unwritten, rooted in myth. But their spiritual essence was oneness of all things. I see God at the heart of both traditions. Now, Patrick, being familiar with the culture in Ireland and speaking Gaelic, he chose to incorporate the traditional Irish rituals into his lessons, rather than trying to eradicate native Irish beliefs. For instance, using bonfires to celebrate Easter, since it was customary to honor the Celtic gods with fire. Another melding of traditions is the Celtic cross, which can be traced back somewhere between 500 and 800 BCE. Now, it may have represented the sun and the cosmos, or symbolized north, south, east, and west, fire, air, water, earth, the oneness of all. So in blending the traditional Celtic cross with the Christian cross, Patrick joined the symbols for greater accessibility and acceptance. and I would add greater meaning, the oneness of all. It's interesting to note that the Catholic Church never officially designated Patrick as a saint. We don't really know why. But he is accepted as such by popular recognition, and he's always referred to as Saint Patrick. Now, not all the stories associated with St. Patrick are true. They are products of hundreds of years of storytelling which the Irish excelled at and may have been somewhat exaggerated. Come on, that's funny. One of the best known untrue legends is about his driving the snakes from Ireland.
Yeah.
The story goes that Patrick had gone to the top of a mountain for a 40-day fast. And as he is walking down the mountain after these 40 days, he sees right in front of him some snakes. And the legend says that he was angered by the snakes' look of evil and menace. And so he chased them into the sea, banishing them forever. And from that day forward, there were no snakes to be found in Ireland. Actually, there were never snakes in Ireland. When we look at the science, we can see that the snakes started to migrate from southern Europe northwards about 10,000 BCE as the last ice age ended and temperatures began to rise. The snake migration reached as far as Britain, but then the melting ice caps created the Irish Sea, making it impossible for them to cross over into Ireland. So, banishing the snakes makes a good story, but it was not true. But maybe there's more here. Maybe the snakes were seen as a symbol of the Druids, the high priests of the pre-Christian Celtic world. And driving out the snakes was an allegory for driving out the Druids, and in doing so emphasized the triumph of Christianity over paganism. Another legend says that Patrick carried a walking stick made of wood of the ash tree. And one day, after visiting his parents' home in Britain, Patrick was taking the opportunity to preach to people he passed along the way. And every time he stopped to preach, he would thrust his walking stick into the ground. And it is said that on one such occasion, he preached for so long that his stick, when he hit it into the ground, the stick developed roots and turned into a living tree. I've known talks like that. Let's face it, the early Irish Christian monks were probably the source of these stories in order to promote Patrick as a saint. So why is this Catholic priest who taught Christianity in Ireland some 1,600 years ago so popular that he is still celebrated every year on March 17th? Well, it began with St. Patrick being celebrated with a Mass on his death day. Now, March 17 sits right in the middle of Lent. And Lent is a time of fasting and abstinence in the Catholic tradition. So the Irish would take that day, right in the middle of their 40-day Lenten fast, to celebrate. They could drink, they could eat, they could be merry. It was a perfect time to leave the sorrows and heaviness of Lent, if only for a day. Still, though, traditionally, St. Patrick's Day was largely quiet, with businesses closed and the families sharing quiet celebrations. So how did it get to be so big in this country? Well, the Irish brought it here. They brought it with them to help them remember and connect to their Irish heritage. They arrived in this country as indentured servants or escaping the horrors of war and famine. They may have left Ireland, but they did not forget it. They did not leave their religion. They did not leave their saints. However they got here, They brought their strengths and their traditions, which included St. Patrick's Day. This was a day to celebrate and showcase the Irish contributions to America and helped them remember their homeland while assimilating into a new nation. It was also a way, and it continues to be a way, to remind those who have been born on this side of the Atlantic of their roots in Ireland, those of us that have roots there. And what about the rest of us? Those that may not have roots in Ireland, why do they celebrate? Well, maybe they just like the food. Maybe it's just a really fascinating narrative. It makes a compelling tale. Here we have a young man who was taken in slavery at the age of 16. As a slave in Ireland, he worked alone in the fields tending the livestock. He escaped after 6 years, trained for 15 years more so that he could be ordained a Catholic priest, and returned to Ireland to bring Christianity to the people who had enslaved him. Why would he care about these people? Why would he come back? He came back to the land. He came back to the people because he loved them. And for 40 years, Patrick preached and converted the majority of Ireland to Christianity. His was a life of devotion, not only to God, but to the Irish people. And he did work some miracles. According to historical accounts, he healed the sick, and there are even some stories of him raising the dead. But I think those might have been a little exaggerated, but what do I know, 1,600 years later. What is clear is his love for the people of Ireland as it shines through his teachings and practices. He is credited with constructing 365 churches and monasteries over that 40-year period, which in addition to being places of worship were also centers for education. And these learning centers played a critical role in preserving the Irish language, literature, and art, helping to preserve Irish cultural heritage. It is a testament to his love and care that his teachings advanced the Christian faith while honoring Ireland's heritage, not destroying the old, but blending it with the new by the word, not by the sword. From a kidnapped shepherd boy to a revered saint, Patrick's journey is a testament to the power of faith, resilience, and yes, forgiveness. His teachings and missionary work left an indelible mark on Christianity and the Irish culture. The legends, symbols, and places associated with him continue to inspire and shape our understanding. As we celebrate St. Patrick's Day on Tuesday, let's remember the man behind the myth. Let's remember his legacy of love and forgiveness that continues to inspire. And I would like to leave you with a blessing from St. Patrick. May the strength of God pilot us. May the wisdom of God instruct us. May the hand of God protect us. May the word of God direct us, and be always ours this day and forevermore.